Today on the EOR podcast, my guest is the fierce, funny, and fearless Sasha Graham, host of the hit podcast Sports Will Save Us All. A former ballerina turned sports superfan, Sasha's storytelling pulls you in with humor, grit, and heart. We talk about how sports connects us, shapes us, and sometimes saves us. If you've ever cried over a comeback win, this episode's for you. Sasha Graham, welcome to the EOR podcast. Let's go. Hey, everybody, it's Quinn Magnuson, host of the EOR podcast. We have a very special guest today, Sasha Graham from the Sports Will Save Us All podcast. I was a guest on your podcast, Sasha, a few weeks ago. Absolutely loved it. Looking forward to our conversation again. And I don't think there's anything we talked about then that we can't talk about now, but we're now going to talk more about you and less about me. And so hard-hitting question. I am, a journalist at heart. Here's the tough question. Why does Milo not like mornings?
I love it. There are a certain section of society who call him Milo instead of Milo, and it tends to be this international flair. And since I consider you internationally fabulous, I love that you call him Milo.
Do you say Milo?
Uh-huh. Everybody in the United States is Milo. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, here in Canada, anytime that name's come up, and it's rare if it comes up, it's Milo, but okay.
Yeah,
why does Milo not like morning? So for those of you who don't know what I'm referring to, I mean, if you're a fan of Sasha and you understand her background, she has 2 children's books that she's written through Tiny Ninja Books. And I love that because I'm like, I would love to write a children's book. But Milo does not like mornings. And the other one is Whitney Wins at Everything. Is that it?
Whitney Wins Everything. Huh?
Whitney Wins Everything.
Yeah. So Milo, it's so funny actually that you bring up the books because, the Milo came out in 2019 and Whitney came out in 2021. He released Milo in Spanish in 2020. So it's been a little bit since, the books have come out, but just actually like on Monday, I got a text from a bookstore wanting to order a ton more of each of the titles. And so they've been top of mind again for me. So I've really been thinking about them. So thank you. They're, my bonus kids that you're bringing up. Milo Does Not Like Mornings was based on my daughter at the time, who getting her up out of bed was a theatrical event every single day. Like any parent who has a kid who doesn't want to get out of bed, like they go boneless and they come up with like weird things, like they're in the book. You hear that, Milo says that he's stuck in the tar pits. He's a dinosaur stuck in the tar pits, right? Like kids are so weird and fabulous. And so that was, she is my inspiration for many things and happened to be the inspiration for Milo too.
I was wondering if your own children were actually named Milo and Whitney. I'm assuming not.
They are not, no. Although
Okay.
I do have a Finnegan. I have an Indiana who's named after Indiana Jones, and then I have an Odessa, which is a family name, but also like the female form of Odysseus. So
I love unique names. Like my children are Annika and Leif, so very Scandinavian names.
right. Yeah.
But wow, Finnegan, okay, I gotta know, where does Finnegan come from?
So Finnegan we're both of Scottish and Irish descent, my husband and I. So Finnegan, it's hard to get more Irish than that. But when we looked it up, we kept hearing it and I kept loving it when I was pregnant with him. And then it turns out that it means fair, which I think probably meant, like of complexion, but we took it as just, right? So and that's really important to us, justice and social justice and all of these things. And having a kid, imbuing him with a meaning like that just felt, the optimism of first-time parents.
Finnegan Graham. Man, that just rolls off the tongue. So I want a pint of Guinness right in front of me right now.
Let's do it.
And Odessa Graham. Okay, once again, Odessa, where'd that come from?
Yeah, so Odessa is a family name. It was my great-grandmother's name. My uncle also was Greek, and so Odessa is the female form of Odysseus. So it has sort of multiple meanings for us there. And then, like I said, Indiana is my Indiana Jones.
And then the third child is again?
Yeah, so he's Indiana. So Indiana,
right.
Our second boy. So I worked in the movie industry and love Indiana Jones. I love the whole ethos of that, adventure, but also an academic, right? Like could anything be better than that? And then, that we call him indie and we like this idea of being independent and, we like indie films. We like all things independent music. So having a kid named Indy felt, very on brand for me and my husband.
I thought maybe being a sports fan, it was like you saw the movie Hoosiers and you were like, oh, Indiana. But either way, beautiful names. Love that.
Somebody told us when he was a baby, she asked me if he was named after the state of Indiana.
Right.
I said, no, actually, we've never been to Indiana. And she said, yeah, if you had been, you wouldn't have named him that.
And here's our daughter, Bloomington. Exactly. That's awesome. I love that, Sasha. So let's look another hard-hitting question. Let's start with your childhood. Let's talk about growing up in on a farm in Oregon and Jim and peanut butter. So I'm going way. Yeah, we're going the deep dive here. So let's talk about that, growing up on an Oregon farm and how that upbringing informed your approach to, now obviously with sports and your storytelling voice and working at Disney, because obviously you're super creative, super outgoing and gregarious. Like what from that Oregon farm life created that in you?
Boy, that's the $1 million question. So a couple of things jump out. One is that I grew up without a TV. So my parents were these old hippies who were like part of the back to earth movement. I don't know, like this is weird. It was a weird time in our country's history. Maybe we're getting back to it. I don't know. But they had this idea so my dad was working for the Indian Health Service on an Indian reservation in South Dakota when I was born. And they had this idea that they were going to live off the grid and my dad is a physician, my mom is a nurse, and they were going to make all their own clothes and can all their own food and raise kids without any TV. And so they gave away our TV. And so up until I was in high school, we never had TV in the house, which, it's hard to imagine now with all of the screens and all of the technology that we have that was. So what that did for me was I spent, an inordinate amount of time outside running around, riding my horse, Jim, who you mentioned. His full name was Jiminy Crack 2. That was his registered name. He's a beautiful quarter horse. So spend a ton of time outside and being creative, but I also loved to read, so I was just ravenous when it came to reading. So that really informed things. But, jokes on my parents, because the first chance I got, I went to college and became a broadcast communication major, ended up working for Disney, worked in TV, was a television writer and producer. So it was growing up without a TV did not keep me out of the industry. I think it was sort of that forbidden fruit. But yeah, so I think that all of those elements contributed to. And then, of course, played sports. That was my social outlet, was that I loved to play sports growing up like you did. And so that was my friends and my community and my coaches and all of that.
That's sort of the irony there is biting. The fact that, you grew up without a TV, your parents, wanted, like you said, hippies, trying to kind of keep you away from that side of things. And then you end up at Disney. There couldn't be two more opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of, your journey. We'll get to sports in a second, but let's talk about that. University, where'd you go to university? Sorry, I didn't catch that in the research I did.
University of San Francisco.
No, I did read that. Shame on me. So University of San Francisco, and you went there for broadcast communications, I'm assuming. Was that before you went to USF? Was that a dream of yours? Did you want to get into some form of TV broadcast journalism? Tell us that story.
It was interesting because I, had, like I said, very limited contact with television. But one of the things that I had seen was news. And I was I really, really liked the idea of being a news anchor. So that was sort of my idea, was that I would go to school, be a communication major. I had minors in Spanish and French. I speak Spanish and French. And so I decided to do, this whole television track. Well, I was really lucky to really early on. So my senior year of college, I got an internship at a TV station and I had a chance to do on-air work. And what I discovered in, I don't know, 2 shakes of a lamb's tail was that I hated the hair and makeup process. I just wanted to put my hair up in a messy bun and go to work. And in order to be on television, at least in this country, you have to be so well coiffed and primped and plucked and, all of these things. And that was not my jam. And so what I realized was that I really liked being behind the scenes. Okay. I loved the writing. I loved the producing. I loved all of that sort of thing. So that was, the route that I went after that.
Incredible. So how did the Disney job come up? Was it just, it's open, I'm going to apply for it? Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, so senior year of college, right after college, I worked in television production, and simultaneously I got a job at a publicity company. So there were several jobs in there, but the one that led to Disney was that I handled the Disney account for Northern California. It was another company where I had interned. So what these movie studios do is that they have field offices that they hire all over the country. And those are the places and the people that handle things like advanced movie screenings for press. So I was the person, and promotions like on radio stations. You don't hear it as much anymore, but we used to give away all sorts of movie tickets to go see free movies in advance to get the buzz going, right? Because everything in movies is dependent on that opening weekend. You have to have a huge opening weekend when it comes to movies in order for the theaters to continue to book the movie. So those are called distributors, right? The people at the theater. So not to get too in the weeds here, but the movie studios, the reason why you see so much promotion, so much marketing, so much advertising for movies in advance is because they are counting on that opening weekend to be big. When it's not big, you see these movies like they just don't stay in theaters and they can't make any money. So anyway, I was working for this company that handled the Disney account. I got the Disney account. So there were a bunch of movie studios we handled, but I was in charge of Disney. So I handled all of Northern California. I then left that company to go and handle the Old Navy account. I went to another agency. I was working for Old Navy then at that point and doing super, super cool things in San Francisco with Old Navy. And so learned just a ton working at this other company because I also handled some tech accounts and it was right in the middle of the tech boom in San Francisco. And so I really sort of sharpened my teeth on real PR. And then I get a call one day from Disney and they said, look, our Southwest director of publicity is leaving and we'd like you to come down and interview for the position. And so I talked to my boss at the agency where I was working and he was like, yeah, when Disney calls, you take that call, right? Like he was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I've been really lucky to have great bosses and he really encouraged me. And I went down there and next thing I knew, I was working for Disney and down in Burbank.
That's incredible. That's an incredible story. And something that I've spoken to on a lot of the episodes with regardless of the guest background is that looking back, if someone said to you when you were 16, 17, let's say you're in high school or maybe even at USF San Francisco, you know what? In 10 years, you're going to be working at Disney. Mm-hmm. Really? Okay. Like we have no clue what the future holds. All we can do is put the effort into moving towards a general direction and then kind of just take the opportunities that come to us.
It's funny you say that actually, because what had happened right before that was I was working for this agency and I had written a list because I knew that what I was doing, I loved my coworkers, but the work wasn't exactly what I wanted to be doing. And so I was trying to sort out what it was that, I wanted. And so I had written this list and it was things like I want to work either music or film and I want to work in-house, right? I didn't want to work for an agency. I actually wanted to work for the company. I wanted to be out of San Francisco because San Francisco was so cost prohibitive. So like there was this list that I had made so that when Disney called, I looked at my list and was like, tick, 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 right? And I feel like that's something that helps with that, effort piece because otherwise, when you get that call, you don't realize it's what you're looking for.
Well, you were being directionally correct, meaning you had your list, your check boxes, and it's like this opportunity checks these boxes. Great. Mm-hmm. So that you move down that road. It's like your little detour, and that's what you do for the next 4 to 5 years. I believe you're at Disney for 5 years roughly, and you do that. But that's what I love about life, and what I'm learning about life at 54 now is when people say to me, so what are your plans for this, or do you have idea of how that's going to turn out? It's like, no, I don't at all. All I can do is put effort to go towards an area. It's like when I say go to the city, but I don't know what street we're going to go to, right?
Right.
And that's just life in general. And I think sports is the same way. Did you see Scotty Scheffler's press conference yesterday?
I just saw clips from it.
Oh my God. Literally, it defined really what I believe effort over results embodies. And I reposted it to my LinkedIn and to other channels. But basically he goes, as professional athletes and as a professional golfer, sometimes I wonder why I'm doing what I do. I love the game. I love the work that I put into it. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. But you win the Masters, and for a few hours, there's elation and whatever. And then, all right, what's for dinner? That hitting the mountain peak of winning the Masters, winning the U.S. Open, or whatever major tournament for him, lasts minutes. It's like, okay, what's next? And I love that because what he defined was And almost all athletes are like this. And don't get me wrong, all athletes want to win a championship. Absolutely. That's why you play the game. And you to win a championship. But there are athletes out there, and this is where the sports connection is going to come, Sasha, is that they'll never win anything in their life. Look at Jim Kelly. You go to 4 Super Bowls, don't win it. Okay, I'm an AFC championship ring. I have 5 of them, but it's like they play to play the game for a chance at winning, for maybe getting a championship. But there are thousands of athletes out there that will go their entire careers and never win a thing.
Right.
And Scotty put it best. He goes, why do we do it? Because we love the challenge. And we love what it does for us as a person, how it grows us. Now, I'm changing his words a little bit, but basically it's about the challenge. And that's what I love about what he said. And this is what I'm getting back to your story now. It's like you didn't at 10 years old say, I'm going to work for Disney. You were just like, I like being creative. I like being outgoing. I wanted to go into broadcasting. So you head down a path, a general path. You go to USF to do broadcast communications. And then you kind of let the opportunity sort of come to you, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there is, to Scotty's point, like there's a little bit of a risk of being, the dog that catches the car. Because when we are driving and driving and driving and all of our effort is being put into these things, and then suddenly we achieve it, we win the Masters or we get the job at Disney or we, whatever it is, it's a little bit like, what now? And if you haven't learned to really embrace the effort part of it and love that part of it, love the grind, that I've talked to a lot of people on my show who have suddenly been like, well, heck, what now? And I talk to a lot of people who both transition out of sports and have that experience, who achieve their highest goal and have that experience, or get injured and have that experience. That who am I without this? And if what you love is the effort, then we're always going to have the effort, right?
Well, and you'll never work a day in your life, so to speak, if you love putting the effort in, if you love the chase, the journey, the trust the process. And that's what I think most athletes, if not all, want to win a championship. But ultimately in the end, and they actually did a study on this, they said that professional athletes, after winning a major championship, tend to go through a bout of depression. And that's not just professional athletes. I've seen that happen in my family. I've seen that happen in people in business. They reach this goal that they had set for themselves, this pinnacle, and they hit it, and then they go, okay, now what?
Now what?
And it's very common.
I feel it doesn't fix everything. That's the other part of it, is that, like it has to be one piece of the puzzle as opposed to, the whole puzzle. Because, when you win a championship, sure, it could feel great, but then
I'm not sure if you're familiar with Alex Hormozy, but he basically said, he's on everybody's podcast, it seems like weekly, but he espoused, he goes, you've already achieved goals that you said would make you happy. I was like, I had to think about that one. I had to reread it. I was like, holy crap. Yeah. How many times go back into your life when you were a kid, when you're a teenager, when you're in college and whatever, and you go, if I get that job, I'll be super happy. And you get it and you're happy for the moment, kind of like what Scotty said. And then you go, okay, now what? And then you set the next goal. And that's true. It's like you've already achieved a lot of goals you thought would make you happy. And that's why I always kind of believe the pursuit of happiness is it's the happiness of the pursuit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
We're at that perfect age right now to be reflecting on all of things, right? Like where we're like, what makes
wisdom?
Like what? Yeah, we're so wise now.
We're the wise old owls. So let's talk about sports. Let's talk about your background in sports, because coming from small town Oregon, what was your sports life growing up? Because we talked about mine, and obviously my entire family was just like athletes and sports and they ended up in the pros. What was your sports childhood like?
Yeah, so I've thought about this a lot, actually, doing what I do, and about, why I love sports so much. And so starting really young, I had some success, right? So I found that when I moved my body in competition with other people, that I would do well, right? So whether it was racing people or wrestling people or jumping off of things, that I was always very brave, like, we would jump off our barn all the time, like. That was a place that gave me positive feedback, right? So I think that anytime you get positive feedback on something, right, then you start pursuing that.
Yep.
That becomes like a driver for you. So that's what happened to me. And there, like I said, we didn't have a TV, so there wasn't a lot to do. And so I would just sign up for every sport. Like I tried every single sport. So, growing up, I would do swim team all summer. I was a pretty good competitive swimmer as a little kid, and we would play soccer. I played softball. I was, made the all-star team in softball, right? Like, so I was just one of those kids who I like playing sports. And then at some point, I guess probably middle school going into high school was when, you have to kind of narrow things down, I guess, a little bit. And so I narrowed down to volleyball, basketball, and track. And I know that doesn't really like compared to today's standards of like kids specializing at age 7, but I those were my sports. And my very best friends all played those sports with me, so, and to this day, they're close friends of mine. We had our high school reunion. We all stayed together and had a blast. And, it's just so it was very much my community. And, we had a lot of success together, and it was a blast.
So growing up in that environment, and I'm assuming when I say small town Oregon, I'm assuming it was a small town. Like you said, your parents were, you're living on a farm and
Yeah.
hippie parents and so forth.
6,000 people when I was growing up.
There you go. That's not too small. But it's small enough. And
1,000's pretty small.
yeah, I guess. So this love for sports, and we're going to get to the podcast in a second, but I love the title of your podcast. And like I said, we'll delve into it deeper, but sports will save us all. And it just spoke to me. And I want to thank Brandon Dave for putting us together and, linking us up in terms of doing podcasts together.
Yeah, Brandon's awesome.
At what point in time though, was sports not competitive for you anymore? Like maybe you stopped being a competitive athlete, but you still just absolutely loved sports in general. Like, was it a parent that kept that love going for you? Was it a friend, a coworker? Like, how does this love for sports transcend itself now into your adult life and then ultimately into a podcast?
I'm very amused that you think that I'm no longer competitive at sports, Quinn.
I'm sorry, I should not make. Well, okay, so when I could say I'm competitive. Everybody could be competitive, but I'm saying you're not getting paid for it.
Right. Well, so interestingly, my husband played volleyball in high school. And so when he and I started dating, we lived in Manhattan Beach down in Southern California. And, Manhattan Beach is just the epicenter of sand volleyball. My husband is awesome. And he said, why don't we go play sand volleyball? And so we ended up playing sand volleyball down in Manhattan Beach, which was amazing. And, again, like so many of my favorite people have been teammates. And so to have, your partner also be a teammate is pretty damn cool. So he and I played volleyball together, and then we moved to Oregon. When we got to Oregon, we started playing indoor volleyball together because, it's Oregon and it rains a ton in Oregon. And we played indoor. And so then when we moved to Arizona, we started playing sand volleyball again. We moved down here in 2011, and we still play Power 4 sand volleyball every week. So that's definitely feeds my soul. It is a standing, people have date night with their partners, and mine and Alan's date night is going to play volleyball together every week with, some of our closest friends. So, so that part of it is a huge, important part of both of our lives. To answer your question about who fed that, I think that it was very much my friends in my community. My parents were, we would go skiing together, but they weren't super, I guess my dad was a runner, but it wasn't like your family, it wasn't like this super, athletic, sports are everything.
Watching it on TV every day. Yeah.
Well, seeing as we didn't have a TV.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah, the carrier pigeon was bringing news of the games to the Lord to household. So I think that a lot of that was driven by me, which is a really interesting thing to look back at, and to look back at now as a parent, that and to be in the field that I'm in now and think about how involved parents are with their kids' athletics, right? And to think, my parents would come to most of my games, and, before I could drive, they would make sure that I was where I needed to be and whatever. There wasn't the focus on it that I watch parents have on their kids now at all.
Do you think that allowed you to just enjoy sports for sports then? Because we talk about the overactive parents, the helicopter parents who are involved too much in their kids' sporting lives. Do you think that helped you appreciate athletics and sports more?
I mean, I know that I did. I don't know where that, I mean, our existence,
Yeah.
it's so hard to examine that, but I do know that like everything was my choice. Everything
Yeah, that's
was
what I mean. Yeah.
yeah, like I was the one who decided to go out for track freshman year. I was the one who stuck with, basketball and volleyball and went to all of these camps all summer long. All of these things. It wasn't because a parent was saying, "Okay, this is what you have to do to get to the next level," right? And when I decided to not accept a college scholarship to play sports in college, that was also my decision. That was sort of what I had always pictured. And then USF came through with an academic scholarship, and I took it because I wanted to study abroad my junior year. So if I was playing a sport, I wasn't going to be able to do that. And so when I got this other opportunity, I mean, literally, Quinn, I don't even remember having a conversation with my parents about it. Like it was just, the letters came to me. They weren't coming to my parents, and I was opening them and deciding what to do. Right. And so comparing that to sort of what's happening now with kids, it just sort of boggles the mind.
Can I explore that for a second, Sasha? Because when I speak about effort over results, it's not just business. It's coaches with athletes, it's parents with their children, it's teachers with their students. Was your and I say this with 100% respect for your parents because they were both academics, right? But was there sort of hands-off approach to allowing you to make those decisions? Like, and I go back to my comment about sports parents and how overbearing they can be. But was that sort of hands-off approach helpful in your growth and allowing you to make those mistakes and figure out your own path and take on your own challenges? Was that, did you find that was helpful?
Well, I mean, here's the thing with kids and parents and being an adult and all of those things is that you look back and there's good and there's bad. And I think that most people are doing the best they can. In my case, the life that I have and the life that I've built, you can't extricate it from that experience, right?
Yeah.
Like it is so hard to tell the cause and effect. And, maybe having a childhood like that and parents like that made me the incredibly independent and driven and happy person I am today. That the proof is maybe in the results, so yes.
But there was no expectation of a result. You just enjoyed sports and you just made decision. You said, okay, well, I want to go to this school and I want to travel abroad and I want to do that. And you headed directionally towards what you wanted. And some of it came true and some of it didn't. But obviously,
I think that in my case, it was a lot of, not to get too, armchair psychologist here, but I think there was a lot of a desire on my part to please them. And so I think that I had a drive to please them or to impress them that was unattainable. And I think that that was something, and I see that in a lot of athletes that I talk to, that, that there's a hole that a lot of athletes are trying to fill. And, people try to fill that hole in all sorts of unhealthy ways, right? I mean, I think that that's where a lot of addiction issues come from is, people feeling like they're missing something. And so they're trying to find it. And if you can do it with sports in a healthy way and you can find a community and you can find great coaches, I mean, we've talked about this, about your experience, that it can be a really, really powerful, positive thing. And I think that for me, that's what it was.
I wonder what, and I don't know if this is a controversial statement, but I wonder if you were to interview 10,000 professional athletes, if there are 10,000, I'm sure there are, but and ask them, when you were growing up, what type of parent did you have? Was it a parent that put you in sports immediately and basically guided you through and made all the decisions for you and told you where to be, what to eat, what time to wake up and everything? Or did you have a parent that, made sports available to you and was just happy that you were involved? Or did you have a parent that was completely hands off, maybe even really wasn't even sports inclined themselves, but you just happened to find your way? Because I made a statement the other day. I was talking to a hockey, and he works with young athletes, hockey coach. And we both agreed that burnout of kids in sports often comes from the expectations others have of them and them fulfilling those expectations. I would even say for my own kids, my kids, if they were being completely honest, would say, yeah, you know what? Like there was a lot of years there where basically we were just trying to fulfill your expectation of us, Dad. It ended up good. But at the same time, if we look back, yeah, it was that. In the interviews that you do on Sports Will Save Us All, and when you're talking with athletes or even potentially with parents of athletes, do you find that that's true? That the majority of athletes who succeed and get to the highest levels kind of grew up in a family where they were more or less fulfilling the expectations of the mom, the dad, or both.
Right, right. I've asked this question a lot, and I'm lucky on my show that in addition to athletes and coaches that I interview, I also talk to, these psychologists and psychiatrists and authors and all of these people. And two come to mind. One of them is Brooke Choulet, Dr. Brooke Choulet, who's a psychiatrist. She's a sports psychiatrist who's worked with both the Phoenix Suns and the Phoenix Mercury here in Arizona. And I asked her this question, and because I find it fascinating, like what makes people, because it is hard. I mean, the lifestyle that we see of professional athletes, like professional basketball players say, it looks amazing. It looks amazing. But we had a neighbor who played for the Suns, and he was immediately next door. And so we would kind of watch his house sometimes, and he was gone. This guy traveled so much. Like, it was unbelievable how much he was on the road and how hard he worked. And I mean, it really gave me this new perspective. So I asked Dr. Choulet about this very thing. And what she said was that she had really found that the common factor was grit, that the people who were able to maintain and compete at this really high level were people who somewhere along the line had to develop this really high level of grit. Now, where that comes from, I think that varies for different people, but being uncomfortable is something that people, the human body doesn't like to be uncomfortable most of the time. So if you are competing at that high of a level, and you could certainly speak to this, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I mean, you like with your ripped biceps, like what the heck, man? Like who goes golfing with a ripped bicep?
When we say ripped, we mean like they're torn. I'm not shredded. I'm not ripped. It didn't get, any stretch of the imagination, but
I don't know. You're pretty ripped too.
I'm trying. The TRT helps. Yeah. I love this conversation, and because we both love sports and we both have kids, and I'm sure your kids are involved in sports as well, but it's like, parents who were athletes themselves. And my wife, she played college basketball. She was a 6-foot post at the university here, and we developed a 6'5" son and a 6-foot daughter, and we knew they were going to be athletes. But we also agreed when we were talking about child rearing, we said we're not going to push them into any one sport. We didn't force them to play football. It's an interesting story how my son ended up in football, and my daughter wasn't going to have to play basketball because mom did. We put them in gymnastics and soccer at a really young age because it's like, figure your body out, run around, just get sweaty, right? And then later on, it's like, hey, do you want to try this? Do you want to try this? Okay, sure, go ahead. We really didn't push them into anything. And I think that's important for young parents who have kids who they want, just keep them active, right? Just keep them active. Don't necessarily put them in competitive sports. If they find they take a shining to one particular sport, great, do it. Support them in that. But I slap myself on the wrist daily for the way I kind of handled my son's football career, because I think I did see, oh, there's an opportunity here to get a scholarship and go to the States and play pro. And I maybe pushed too hard, and he's handled it beautifully. But I think it's just important for kids to stay active, and I'm sure you agree with that. Hey, everyone, I'm your host, Quinn Magnuson. Welcome to the EOR Podcast, the show for leaders, high performers, and the secrets to grit, growth, and greatness. I want to ask you something. Are you an organization looking to build a rock-solid strategy that will grow your people and end up in increased productivity and profitability? Then I invite you to start by going over to our website, effortoverresults.com, and book your free strategy call directly with me. No obligation, just a friendly one-to-one call so I can learn more about you and your team goals. So if you're ready to get real, go over to effortoverresults.com, book your free call today. And now let's get back to the show.
Well, I think that also I would add to that and say that you never know how long your kids are going to play. So enjoy the here and now, right? That if they're playing Little League baseball, enjoy Little League baseball. Yeah. Like, don't start thinking about, the next step. Don't start thinking about their club team or the travel team or the high school team or the college team. Like, that's my enjoy the here and now, because you just don't know what's going to happen.
So let's turn the corner here. The podcast and top, I believe it is. I'm looking at my notes here. So you sit in the top 10% globally. You won an award for social impact. I want to talk about that for sure. But started in 2022. I believe you're getting close to 200 episodes. You're nearing 200, right?
Yeah.
What motivated this? Like, because here's my theory, Sasha. I started this podcast. I mean, okay, I have a background in radio. You have a background in PR and working with Disney. But when you start a podcast, I think most podcasters started because they just want to share information. They love something so much and they just want to share information and talk to other people who love that topic, right? What was the impetus behind Sports Will Save Us All, and what started it, and why did you decide to start a podcast when there's millions of other podcasts out there talking about sports?
Millions. So
Millions.
let's see. Backing up just a little bit, the top 10% figure is an old one. We're actually in the top 2.5% now.
I apologize.
You do not need to apologize. Just celebrate with me. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So the genesis of Sports Will Save Us All. And first of all, I should tell you that I had Henry Abbott, who is the author of this awesome book called Ballistic, who you would love. I had him on the show recently, and he got on and he said, I love the name of your show, Sports Will Save Us All. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, you like it? And he was like, yeah, I was a little worried there for a while. And he was like, but now, I feel better. And I said, what were you worried about? And he was like, Earth. And he said, and now I have hope. He said, because, not only will sports save us all, and he goes, but that's my field. I was like, yeah, you're gonna be instrumental in saving the earth, Henry.
You know what? Well, and it's funny because the reason why the title really, I mean, it's an attractive title because it's a bold statement, right? And during COVID, I said this, I believe I said this to someone. I just stopped watching the news. I had to stop watching it because every day it was just an update on how many cases there were in our city and blah, blah, blah. And then even lately, with what's going on in the world, and it's horrible. And people will say, well, if you don't watch the news, you're just burying your head in the sand. And my response to that is, what am I going to do about it, right? But the beautiful thing I love about sports is sports is about the human condition and people striving to achieve something, to compete, to make themselves better. It's competitive. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some not so good stories that come out of sports, but for the most part it's we can relate. And that's the beautiful thing about sports, is the fact that when we watch sports highlights, when we watch sporting events, when we kind of immerse ourselves in whichever sport you love, maybe you just love baseball, whatever, there's always a feel goodness about it. And it's something we can relate to. And we can see our heroes and stars on the court, on the ice, and the field, which is totally different than world news, where you sit and you look at it and you go, and here's the other thing, it's real. Now, AI, okay, but no, when I watch a baseball game, when I watch a football game, when I watch a highlight, it's all real. You can't fake sports news. News you can fake. Who knows what's going on in the world right now and whether it's AI, produced or whatever. And that's what I love about the title, Sports Will Save Us All, because I do truly believe that. So thank you for having that title. Thank you for starting that show. I want to talk about the guests you have on the show, because a wide variety of guests, even though I think you stay in your lane, so to speak, para athletes to marathoners to journalists to psychologists. Give me your and I'm going to challenge you here, but 170 plus episodes. Give me your top 2 or 3 favorite interviews that you've done.
I mean, you're my favorite, Quinn.
Oh, come on.
I mean, what did you think I was going to say?
This week I'm your favorite.
I've interviewed some kids on the show. I interviewed this kid named Theo Whitehurst, and this is sort of the epitome of loving sports, and Sports Will Save Us All. So I interviewed this 8-year-old kid named Theo Whitehurst. He's a cute kid. He insisted on being called Theodore, and he came in with his mom, and apparently he never goes by that. He always goes by Theo, and yet in this case he wanted to go by Theodore. He might be frozen.
No,
there we go. You could still hear me?
I can still hear you. We'll cut that out later. Post-editing. All right.
You were just staying very still, perhaps.
No, I think that was just me, just my old age.
I'm teasing. You fell asleep for a second.
Yeah.
So anyway, Theodore has something called osteogenesis imperfecta. And so at 8 years old, he had broken more than 200 bones in his life. And he is part of this baseball program here in Arizona called the Miracle League. And so this kid he uses a walker or a wheelchair, depending upon, the day. And this entire stadium is built for people with disabilities. So it's a squishy field. The bases are built in so that there's no ridge, at the base when they get to the base to go around the bases. They're each paired up with a helper who helps them. So here's this kid who is just an absolute delight. And he's talking about how much he loves baseball. He's talking about his roll-up song, right? Like, 'cause they get like a walk-up song, but he's the roll-up song. And so he's talking about how he chooses his roll-up song. And I was just talking to Theo, was one of those moments where I realized what it is that makes sports so magical. And it isn't necessarily, having a dream of going to the pros. It is that community. It's using your body. It's having that experience and being able to, come up to home plate and swing a bat. And so that was definitely a favorite.
Most controversial guest you may have had on?
That would probably be Bobby Lancaster. She's a transgender woman who played in the LPGA, and she was controversial not for the reason that I thought she was going to be controversial, which was that I believe very, very strongly that everybody should be able to play sports. I don't care what your body looks like or how you were born. Like, I think that you should be able to play sports. And Bobby transitioned at age 60 from male to female, had always been a terrific golfer, had golfed in college for the men's team. And then at age 60, started, in Q school and started like playing with the women and did really well and was instrumental in getting the rules changed with the LPGA. And she, at the time, was really an advocate for transgender athletes. And just before I interviewed her, she came out and said, the other part actually that's important to know is that Bobby is also a physician and has been a physician for, her entire life or since, So she came out and said, I no longer think that transgender women should be able to play against cis women and this was something that I didn't agree with, but I said, you know what, I want to hear directly from somebody, right? Like, I think that being able to talk to somebody who we don't agree with and to have a conversation and ask them the questions is tremendously important. And she talked a lot about legacy effects and the length of her limbs and her strength and, having gone through puberty and all of these things. And so that one was definitely my most controversial. And we actually made it a 3-part series because, we talked for a very long time. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine how that would have been a bit of an walking on eggshells conversation. And I fully agree with you, Sasha. Like, I believe that I love it when my guests push back and they challenge me on something that I've said and believe me, do it. Yeah. And I'm okay with that. Like, because more often I've gotten past, and once again, this comes from being the wise old owl now, but and you'd think that I would become more staunch in my opinion at 54, but I've actually softened on it. And I'm like, you know what? We have worse things in the world to worry about,
Yeah. Well, and what it comes down to me is that I think that it's really easy to stop thinking about people as individuals and start thinking about them as a group. And that's where we get into trouble. That if you were to meet an individual who wanted to play a sport and you have a conversation with them, you'd be like, of course you should be allowed to play a sport, right? But when we have distance from things, we're able to dehumanize a little bit. And so instead of thinking about, an 8-year-old kid who was born a boy, but, has always felt like a girl, I think that this is a very, very difficult thing to understand if you have not met somebody who has gone through this or have not talked to parents who have gone through this. And and so I think that is our ability to be sympathetic and empathetic is what makes us so incredible. And I think that when we abandon that and decide to be, have these staunch opinions about things, that's where we get into trouble. And it hurts not only the person who we're railing against, but it hurts us because I think at our best, we are empathetic, loving humans. And that's what we want to be. We don't want to be a-holes, right? That does not feel good. It might feel good in the instant, but we don't really want to be that. We want to have a community and embrace other people. So
yeah. So speaking of inclusion and everybody being able to play sports and be involved in things like that, you are an ambassador for cerebral palsy in Arizona. How has your work with adaptive sports and disability influencers really shaped? Has it shaped the guests that you have on the show, or has it just shaped you in general as a human being and your approach to life?
Yeah, I think that first of all, what I want to say is, anybody who thinks that adaptive athletes or disabled athletes are any less of an athlete than able-bodied athletes has not met one because holy smokes, I have met some athletes who, are either have limb differences or use a wheelchair or these things. And my gosh, like it is. So I think that's the first thing I would say. I think that again, when we moved to Arizona, I started volunteering with a group called Camelot Therapeutic Horsemanship. And Camelot offers lessons in horsemanship to kids and adults with physical disabilities. And so I started meeting all of these Camelot students who are, have disabilities that run the gamut. So it's cerebral palsy, and it might be, vision impairment. It might be, they use a prosthetic, whatever it is. So that really opened my eyes to a couple different things. One, just having that familiarity with people with disabilities, I think is really powerful, but also, the realization that any one of us can become disabled at any point, right? This is not them and us. That, if you have an accident or, have an injury or, there are all sorts, or get older, I mean, that there are all sorts of ways to have a disability. So this idea of thinking about it as us and them is very, very erroneous. That's the first thing. But the second thing was that then, I started having athletes with disabilities on my show. And I mean, talk about increasing the richness of the fabric, that just having this perspective of people. And, the other part, I don't know if you've had this experience, but so many people who have come on my show have become my friends, in the real world. And one of my closest friends was one of the early guests, an athlete with a disability. His name is Richie Bennett. His brother played in the NFL, actually. So, his brother is Drew Bennett, who was, a super quarterback. And Richie comes from this family of four brothers, and their family was just like, shrugged their shoulders when it came to Richie having cerebral palsy. And we're just like, yeah, keep up, buddy. He became an athlete in his own right. And he went to the cerebral palsy world championships twice overseas, and just a tremendous athlete and a tremendous guy. And so he and I had become really good friends. And so, it's again combining, people talk about work-life balance, and for me, there's just no such thing like work and life. The show and my life are just inextricably linked in the most wonderful ways.
Yeah. And I think that's where work-life balance kind of goes out the window, because it's like, if you're loving what you do and you're working 18 hours a day at it, well, great. Like it's what you love. Like I said, you'll never work a day in your life if you love what you do. Work-life balance often comes from people who are stuck in jobs that they hate, right? How do we find the balance there? I want to stay on the sports inclusion though, because so growing up, I had a coach at the high school that I went to, who I ended up being a teacher in the same high school alongside him. And his son was confined to a wheelchair, severe cerebral palsy. And I looked at that situation when I first got to the school, and I thought, so basically that his son would spend all day at home every day. Like where could he really go? He's in a motorized wheelchair. And this man, who is one of my heroes growing up, he was my gym teacher, would take him swimming, would take him skiing, he would dive off of diving boards with him in his arms. We went skiing, and I'm gonna tear up here, Sasha. We went skiing at in Banff in Alberta in Canada as a school group, and he brought Jonathan with him. I was like, he's in a wheelchair. You're bringing him on the bus. You're bringing him into the hotel. Oh yeah, we're taking him skiing too, Quinn. I'm like, what? Okay. And he had actually bought what's called a sledge. And so basically it's almost like a bobsled, and he puts Jonathan inside it, and Dave basically skis behind it with extended arms and skis, and he skis with his son down the hill, the son can't even speak. And he takes him everywhere. And that to me was the epitome of, number one, parent of the decade, if not the lifetime, but inclusion. Because just because someone's confined to a wheelchair, just because someone is limited in their mobility, just because someone is maybe even missing a limb or has, whatever it is, doesn't mean they shouldn't be active, doesn't mean they shouldn't be involved in sports. You can always find a way. And I'm sure that's what you're preaching when obviously you represent, CP, and when you're speaking to this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think too, I would point out to Jonathan's dad, like parent of the year, because, we're all parent of the year because parenting is really hard, right? It's a lot of and it's, can be pretty thankless. But also, I would suggest that being able to bring his son skiing with him, like, also fills his cup, right?
Yeah.
This is not a, all give and no take relationship. That having people with disabilities in our lives enriches our lives. And I think that's the other point here, is that we are built in a lot of different ways. Our bodies work in a lot of different ways. I talk about this a lot with athletes, that, if you line up three of the best athletes in the world, their bodies look completely different, right? You look at, Simone Biles versus, like Charles Barkley, yeah, or Shaq, that famous photo. And then, and then you look at like Caitlin Verfurth, a Paralympian, multiple time Paralympian who I had on my show. Like, these three bodies look very different, and yet they have all competed at the absolute top levels, right? So who are we to say like what body is the best body? I mean, we just can't, because they're all different, and they all work differently, and we all have to work within our own limitations and push those limitations. And so, yeah, that's sort of my take on that, is that we should all have a chance, and we should all get to do the things that we love, and get to explore because we don't know what we like until we get a chance to try it. So, maybe Jonathan is going to love water skiing, that I worked with this awesome Scottish water skiing coach, like, in Scotland, and he's the Scottish water ski champion. And I was like, wait, they water ski in Scotland? What? Miserable. But he
like the Jamaican bobsled team.
Exactly. And he has this really robust program for people with disabilities, where he gets people out on the water behind a boat, I mean, people who use wheelchairs. And I thought, what a cool thing.
Well, the amount of joy, you said it, the amount of joy you're bringing to these people's lives to include them. So Jonathan and his dad, but then, like you said, the fulfillment that his dad got, or the person that includes that person, it comes back hundredfold. And
Right.
and it took me a while to figure that one out. And I think a lot of people have that. Well, they really can't compete at all, so why bother? And it's like, wow, what a closed-minded approach to life. I mean, everybody should be involved in everything as long as they want to be, right? So wonderful.
Well, not to mention, like, why do we play sports? Right? Do we only play sports to win? Like, because if that's the case, then there's a whole bunch of people who shouldn't be playing sports because they're terrible at it. Right? And if we're playing sports because of, the idea of enjoying the here and now, like, that's a different conversation. And, Theo Whitehurst, who's playing with Miracle League, like, why is he playing? It's because, sports are awesome, and we get all of these benefits from them that have little to do with the turnout of the game.
So, nearing 200 episodes with Sports Will Save Us All, have you received any haters, any hate comments on an episode or towards your commentary? Has there been any of that over the last 3 to 4 years?
Yeah, it was actually my favorite review. I got this review one time that was talking about, like, people leave reviews for two reasons. One, because they love something, and two, because they hate it. And the one where I got this negative review, like, I had worked really hard to remain apolitical for my whole show. And I got this because it was after actually the LPGA revised their stance on transgender athletes, and that it's flawed their thinking, because in this country, at least, you can't get treatment under 18. And the LPGA said that you can't have gone through any puberty yet. Well, you can't not go through puberty in this country because you just can't get the care in time. And so I did a short episode. I dropped these short episodes, 10-minute episodes, and I dropped one talking about that, and about how, this is what they're really saying, is that transgender women can't compete in the LPGA. And so I got this review talking about how my audio quality was great, and that I had good energy, but that I was so far left leaning, and that anybody who says that Sports Will Save Us All isn't a political podcast is way off base. And it was pretty funny. And
well, if you've only gotten one hater comment over 100 and whatever 100 plus episodes, that's not bad. I mean, you're not riding a fine line too badly there, Sasha. But I'm waiting for my first hate comment, and I'm sure it'll be from a Russian bot farm. But I want real hate.
Tell yourself it was, even if it wasn't.
Exactly. So let's start to wrap things up here. What's grand vision or goal? And I'm speaking goals now, effort over results. But really, where is the future for this podcast? Where would you like to see it go?
I think about this a lot actually. And in addition to just enjoying where I am right now, because it's in a really, really beautiful spot right now, I would like to have more of an offline component and involve people more. I had a really fun opportunity. Somebody approached me recently about, and I probably shouldn't talk about it very much, but about doing some sort of offline component where people could come in and watch me record episodes. And it's through a very, very big travel company that you definitely have heard of, where they would promote it, and it would be this big thing. And I have been talking about focusing on female athletes and icons for that portion, which I'm really excited about. That's something that has really captured the world's attention in the last few years and has so much room for growth, that those of us who have been playing, women who've been playing sports our whole lives, like, it's not a surprise, but it's kind of fun to watch the rest of the world catch up and be like, wait, this is really fun watching women play sports, right? And so I'm really excited about that part of it. But the nitty gritty of it, I have my own goals as far as really honing in on themes. I really like themes for the show. So, really honing in on themes and then just continuing to tell great stories with my guests. It's such an honor when people come on and are so generous with their stories. And it is just it's the highlight of my life. I love doing it.
You know what I love about that answer, Sasha, is the fact that, and it speaks to effort over results. You didn't say we want to get to 1 million subscribers or we want to get to 1,000 episodes. Like, there was nothing numerical. There was nothing, set in stone. It's just like, you talked about having particular themes and honing in on certain themes, which is more of a refinement, which I love that. And just enjoying the moment. Like, if when you started this, did you think you would be near 200 episodes? Like, did you think you were going to get to 200 episodes?
Yeah, it's just too overwhelming to think that way, isn't it?
I didn't think I'd get past 10, and we're at 37 now here. And it's like, it's because we're just putting in the work, right? And we're enjoying what we do. I mean, if we didn't, we obviously would stop. But I love that. So we're going to let's do a lightning round here. And I want to keep it on the sports thing because I want to get your opinions and I might have to challenge you on this. So here we go.
Right, I feel like I should stretch.
Yep. Favorite sports moment for you live in person.
Okay, I'm gonna jump to just like last week. A former guest on my show gave us tickets to his Phoenix Mercury, for the Phoenix Mercury game, and I've been to countless Mercury games. We've been going for since we moved here in 2011, but they were freaking courtside seats right behind the team. We could hear Nate Tibbetts calling the plays. It was this extraordinary game. Paige Beckers, they were playing Paige's team, and she was there and shooting right in front of us. It was unbelievable. Plus, Alyssa Thomas plays for the Mercury. Her fiance is Dewana Bonner, who was one of the OGs who we used to always watch play for the Mercury. She had not gotten signed. She got signed the next day back to the Mercury, but she was at the game and she got a standing ovation while we were there. So this Mercury game is very top of mind, just from a couple weeks ago.
Awesome. Okay. Favorite sports moment, not live, so obviously on TV, that just drew emotion from you. Like, maybe you cried because, that moment, or what, give us an example of that one.
So, like I said, when I was a kid, we didn't have a TV, but when the Olympics were coming to LA, yeah. The funny story. My mom borrowed a little TV from her mom, so from my grandmother, so that we could watch the Olympics, because my mom has always loved the Olympics. And so we had this little TV, but it was a little black and white TV. And I remember they had like the opening ceremonies in the stadium there, and they'd given everybody flashlights. And they, at one point, like, all put up these flashlights, and unbeknownst to us, because we were watching it on a black and white TV, it was an American flag, but they just looked like light to us. We're like, wait, what is everybody doing and hawing over that? But they really, that was that was the Olympics of Mary Lou Retton. And, for me, as she's just a few years older than me, to watch her hit those perfect tens, like, I will never, ever, ever forget that. Like, she was just.
I remember watching that live too. Like, it's incredible how you remember those things. And that was what, 88?
84. 84.
Oh God, 84. Yeah. So I would have been 13. And every time the Olympics, every 4 years the Olympics comes out, I literally, up here in Canada, we get so much coverage, it's not even funny. Like, we'll get 12 to 15 hours of coverage a day.
Yep.
And so we'll tape it all and then watch it, when we get home from work. I remember when the '08 Beijing Olympics happened, at the end, when the closing ceremonies, the kids literally watched Olympics with me every day for the 14 days or whatever it is the Olympics goes for. They bawled their eyes out because it was over. And I'm like, I have a lot on tape. We can keep watching the stuff we have on tape
all year, kids.
They got into their little outfits and we gave them like compact discs with things around their neck because that's what the Beijing medals look like. So they and we got them. We got wood boxes, crates, and we got them to stand on. And we took pictures of them. Yeah, and it was so cute. And then they cried when they closed. Oh my God, that was mine. Sorry, I didn't mean to trump your. This was mine.
It's a collective moment.
It is. Favorite athlete all time.
Oh, jeez. How do I even answer that?
If you want.
Okay. So, people who jump straight to mind are Diana Taurasi, of course, from the Phoenix Mercury. She played Mercury her whole career, just extraordinary. She just retired. So I have always loved watching her. Weirdly, and I'm just gonna go with this, the other person who popped to mind was somebody who I played with in high school. Her name is Liz Brendan, and I have often thought that if Liz had been born about 20 years later, she would have been at the top of the WNBA. She was just extraordinary. The WNBA started in 1996. And so, the timing, didn't quite work out for Liz. And she ended up coaching at Nebraska. And I think about her a lot and about what her life would have been like if she had been born just a little bit later.
Excellent.
So that's what I'm going to go with right now. There are all, I love Sha'Carri Richardson. I love sprinters. I love, I love so many athletes. And
what's interesting about people who truly like have immersed themselves in sports their entire lives, watching it, playing it, whatever, like you and me and the friends we know, is that if someone asked me that question, I don't think I could answer it because it goes by decade almost, right? It goes by sport. I might like the interview I did the other day. He goes, who's your favorite baseball player of all time? Okay, well that's okay. I can limit that to Gary Carter, number 8 for the Mets and Expos. Okay, but it's like if somebody said who's your favorite athlete of all time, I'd be like, well, I mean, like hockey or football.
I know you want to qualify it.
I think that speaks to being just an absolute sports junkie, though, is that I think people who limit themselves to one team, one athlete, it's almost like there's a bit of blinders on there. Like I just love sports in general. Like people like, who's your NFL team? My son, it drives him nuts because he's a Seattle Seahawks fan and has been for a long time. And even when they suck now, he goes, I still cheer for him. When Russell Wilson got traded, I kind of stopped cheering for them. Because
I was just going to say Russell Wilson is also a favorite, right?
Right.
Like Marshawn Lynch is a favorite. Yeah.
Well, and Baker Mayfield, one of my all-time favorite college football players of all time. So when he went to Cleveland, I became a Browns fan, and now he's in Tampa. I'm a Tampa fan. I love Josh Allen in Buffalo so I'll be like, oh, the Bills are my team, and my son's like, that's not your team, Dad. Like you haven't cheered for the Bills ever in your life, and I'm like, I know, but I love them now because Josh Allen's there, and I'm just a like player sort of. I just want to see a good game. I'm not going to get upset. The only team literally in my entire life, and we talked about this in the show, is the Chicago Blackhawks, and only because my uncle played for him. So I'm always going to be a Blackhawks fan, but once again, they kind of suck right now. So tough to say that, but I just love sports in general. You love sports in general. Sports Will Save Us All. The podcast is absolutely fantastic. I want all my listeners to go and subscribe to your podcast because there's so many podcasts out there, and you can go listen to the Pat McAfee show and podcasts like that. But Sasha's podcast, for everyone who's listening today, not just because I've been on it and we've had these great conversations, but super dynamic. I love the themes you bring on. I love the fact that you'll talk about sports movies. I love the fact that you'll talk about, individual athletes, transgender sports. Like you really start to broaden the spectrum of topics. And I think you bring a lot to the table, even though you're still really in your infancy, 3.5, 4 years, 200 episodes or less. You're just getting started, Sasha. So where can people find you? Obviously, the podcast, Sports Will Save Us All. Let's talk about your social media platforms and where people can find the show and find you.
Yeah, we've been really lucky to get everything. So we're on all the social media at Sports Will Save Us All. The website is sportswillsaveusall.com, right? So, and if you were on all of the platforms as far as the podcast goes too. So if you, no matter where you listen, you'll be able to find us.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Sasha, for joining us today. And I hope you have me back on your show one more time sometime in the future, not too soon. And we'll get you back on. We gotta have a co-host show where we talk about a particular event or sporting event, something like that. Have some fun with it.
Seriously, I would love that. And this has just been so fun. I really, really wish that you lived around the corner so that we could just go to games together.
Oh, and the funny thing is my son was in Arizona for 5 years, and now that he's just left Arizona, mind you, you're in Phoenix, I believe, but he was in Tucson. But yeah, you know what? I'll be down there someday soon, and we'll get together and we'll have a drink and watch a game. Well, thanks, Sasha, for joining us today, and like I said, we'll talk in the future.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for having me.